Okay, I made a video recently about radial categories, talking about consciousness as a radial category marked by prototypes and family resemblances. So I just want to see if I can explain what I mean by a radial category and try to apply it to consciousness using this pen and this piece of paper. Okay, let's give it a go. Radial category comes from the work of people like Eleanor Roche, George Lakoff, that kind of stuff. And I'll just distinguish it first from categories marked what I call classical categories. A classical category, something like even numbers, is easiest to represent like that. This is the class of even numbers. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, etc. All the even numbers are inside that. All the odd numbers are all outside that. Very clear distinction between the one and the other. That's a classical category. You can do certain things with that, particularly mathematical things, obviously. A radial category is different. So let's have a look at a radial category. A good example of a radial category is something like chairs. Chairs. Just have a thinking for a minute about a chair. Actually, let's pretend that let's pretend something, a bit of drama here. Let's pretend that you and I are setting up house together. And I say to you, I think that corner over there looked really nice with a chair with a lamp next to it. Wouldn't it? A chair with a lamp next to it. You go out and buy the lamp and I'll get the chair and I'll meet you back here in 2 hours and we'll have this lovely little setup here where we can sit and read. It'd be great. You buy the lamp, I'll buy the chair. In 2 hours time I come back with a bean bag and you come back with a 19th century oil lamp. It wouldn't look great, okay? And the reason why we've got into a mix up there, the reason why we're not designing good house together is because we have fuzzy understandings of what chairs and lamps are. They function perfectly well in conversation, not so good when you want to do anything with them. So why is that? And it's because let's stay with chair. Chair is a radial category, so, which means that we understand it conceptually in terms of prototypes. You've got an image in your mind of what a chair is, as do I, and we place that at the centre of our category. So, prototypical chair. That's right at the centre. Now, of course, it'll have some features. You know, and we could probably try to get a definition of it. In fact, prototypical categories like chair are usually marked by what are called kinesthetic image schemas, which means that there's a particular way our body responds to all chairs, or seems to, and we associate its definition with the kinesthetic action of sitting on something. But that's not enough of a definition to define, because obviously we'd sit down lots of things, not just chairs. But we could start to define the category of chairs. We could start to say, it's something to sit on. We could start to say it's something with legs. You know, the prototypical chair, because obviously a beanbag doesn't have legs. But it's still a chair, but it's not quite as chairy, is it? Or we could say it's... we wouldn't want to think of bench as being the centre, so we'd probably say it's domestic. I think if I came back from that shopping expedition with a garden bench, you'd probably think I was a twit. So it's a domestic object for sitting in that's got legs. We might even say it's got 4 legs, yeah, because if it had 3 legs, it was a milking stool. You'd probably be a little bit disappointed by that. If I came back with a throne, it would probably have all these definitions, but it still wouldn't feel quite as chairy as the prototypical chair we have in our minds. So it might say it has to have no symbolic value or function. So it's not a throne, is it? Okay, if I came back from that shopping trip and I got a wheelchair or a commode, you know, one of those with a pan underneath it, you can go to the toilet on your chair. Again, you would think I'd gone nuts because I'm not corresponding to the prototypical image of your chair. So again, it has to have no other function, the prototypical chair. What else about chairs? Well, again, if I came back with a settee, I can do all those things. It's no other function, there's no symbolic function, domestic, I can sit on it, it's got 4 legs. But, you know, a settee or a couch is not a chair in our understanding, so we'd have to say one person only. Yeah, so what we're starting to get here is a constellation of ideas which represent chairs. You know, all these chairs, you know, beanbags, of course, are kind of chairs. Thrones are kinds of chairs. Kitchen chairs, as opposed to couches or easy chairs, are kinds of chairs. But they're not prototypical. So I could do that again by saying, okay, so there's a prototypical chair in the centre, and then there's radially coming out from that, you've got things which fulfil some of these functions, but not all. So a bean bag, I can sit on it, it's domestic, but it hasn't got legs. A throne, I can put a throne here, yeah, it fulfills most of those functions, but not all, it's got too much of a symbolic function, and so on. And I can get lots of these things coming off it, which is why it's called a radial category, because these ideas radiate out from it. And there's things which are a long way away from it. A very small beanbag for a child, or you can even get beanbags for pets. So you know, it's still a kind of a chair, but it's a long way away from the prototype. You know, you work the way out. Yeah, the doll's furniture chair. You know, a lot of these. So once you get out, you're really way out here, and you're stretching the understanding of what a chair is. It's still, you can't deny that it is a chair. In fact, there's a famous artwork of a chair which is like 30 feet high. It's exactly like a chair, except it's just too big to sit on. So is it a chair or not? You know, it's way out on one of the radial spokes. So that's how a radial category works, with prototypical entities held in the mind here in the middle, which fulfill, you know, a number of functions, and I can increase this list. And these things span out, and the extent to which our particular example, the beanbag, the throne, the whatever, corresponds to our prototype is the extent to which it fits these general properties, and the extent that it doesn't is how further out it spans on one of these radial arms. Okay, I hope that makes some kind of sense. But we could do the same with consciousness. You know, we all have a prototypical understanding of consciousness, which I would suggest is drawn from our individual experience of it. But then there's lots of things that it consists of. You know, it consists of things like memory and sensory engagement. And what else? The concept of a self, an I, in the picture somewhere. That's part of our prototypical understanding of consciousness. The thing that you're probably experiencing right now, and I'm probably experiencing right now, has this kind of stuff. It probably consists of language as well. The thing that you're experiencing, which is prototypical consciousness. Allied to this self-I thing, probably a self-other distinction. I know what's me and I know what's not me. What else? Yeah, I think that'll probably do for now. So, you know, and you can probably imagine there's a lot of these things, just like there's a lot of these things for chairs. I can keep on listing these things around the idea of consciousness. But you wouldn't want to take any of these away and say, oh, well, that thing's no longer conscious. If it did that, then people like Clive Waring. Clive Waring was a musician who lost a large part of his memory. Oops, started to write memory. Clive Waring. He can only hold, he's got old memories, but he can't lay down any new memories, so he's constantly waking up. So he has serious memory impairment. But you can't say he's not conscious. He just has his definition of conscious, his experience of consciousness, the consciousness that he seems to manifest, is not our prototypical consciousness. Similarly with sensory engagement, Helen Keller, blind and deaf, I think. Possibly mute, but I don't know, that might just be a side effect of her deafness. Yes, of course, you wouldn't want to do... She hasn't got sensory engagement, so certain kinds of sensory engagement, but you wouldn't want to say she's not conscious. Or the guy who wrote The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, no mobility apart from one of his eyes. You wouldn't want to say he's not conscious. The self, or the I. Well, you know, quite a lot of the time we do lose our sense of self. Most of the time, I suspect, we don't have a sense of self, or don't feel as if we have, but you wouldn't want to say we're not conscious just because we're daydreaming. And self, or the distinction. You know, I'm thinking of, is it Helen Bolte Taylor? Or just meditators. You know, meditators are in the business of trying to break down self or the dualities, aren't they? But you wouldn't want to say when they do that they are not conscious, just because their consciousness doesn't correspond to the prototype we have in our minds. And similarly with language. You know, a child up to the age of whatever it is, 1.5, when they start speaking, yeah, they don't fulfill the prototype of what we understand as consciousness, but you wouldn't want to say they're not conscious. So again, we've got this radial category with children and the deaf and Alzheimer's patients and a variety of different people out here who are manifesting different forms of consciousness. And I would say animals. We've got some of this stuff, but not others. And out from animals you might have reptiles who've got some of this stuff but less of it, or different versions of it, less easily to correspond to our understanding of what consciousness is. And some people, and I think Piro 314, who this is primarily done for, would probably say that some of these could be said to exist in something like plants. Sure, plants have got some version of sensory engagement, you might say. You might even say they've got something corresponding to something like memory. But for me, you are way out in left field once you've got to those things. And that doesn't even come close to... It's so far away from my prototype of consciousness that I can't do anything with it. And I suspect most people would agree with me on that. But I'm open to be challenged on that. They certainly don't have a self, and they certainly don't have any of this kind of stuff, simply because they don't have the mechanisms for it. But at that point, that's what I mean by a prototypical category, a radial category marked by prototypes, and then family resemblance, and indeed outliers, which would be out here somewhere, marked by that kind of thing. It's very difficult to talk about, because, yes, you can talk about some of these elements and say, yeah, well, that plant fulfills my definition, but it certainly doesn't fulfill mine. And it's not that one of us is right and one of us is wrong, it's just we're using radial categories in very different ways. We're using the same radial category in very different ways. So until you get into the detail and talk about things like the mechanisms for sensory engagement, which in plants are very different to the mechanisms of sensory engagement that humans have, or you're talking about selves, or you're talking about sensory engagement, other kinds of sensory engagement like pain, or you're talking about memory or language, until you get into that kind of detail, I'm not quite sure what you can do with that, really. Yeah, so I think that's all I need to say on that, really. Yeah, that's a radial category marked by prototypes, consciousness here, chair here, radial elements indicating where we get that prototype from and what kind of forces are at work in that prototype, and then family resemblance leading to outliers, and then beyond. Fuzzy boundaries.